Ever accidentally put your foot in your mouth, like with someone from a totally different culture? It happens. But today we're diving into this world where even like the tiniest little mistake can really ruffle some feathers. We're talking about Elvish etiquette, and believe me, it's complicated.
Oh, it's true. Elven customs. They can seem a little, shall we say, mysterious to those of us on the outside.
Yeah, a bit of a mystery, kind of like trying to understand, I don't know, maybe like ancient riddles or something.
Mhm.
But luckily, we've got Thumb Blackson's guide to be our guide. He's a human diplomat, you see, and he's put together this really insightful, really funny look at Elven society based on his own experiences. And what's wild is that Blackson points out that Elven social standing isn't about like fancy titles or piles of gold. It's about these three, well, he called them pillars: age and wisdom, time and prosperity, and then there's boldness and its spoils.
Right, and it's how these three pillars kind of work together, you know? Like a young elf who's proven their courage, say, on a raid, they might be respected for that. But then you have an elder who has spent centuries, literally centuries, honing their craft, and that commands a whole different level of respect, you see.
Okay, so it's not just about how many years you've racked up. It's about what you've done with that time. It's about the impact of those experiences. Blackson actually uses this example. Have you ever seen like a really skilled blacksmith working in their forge?
I can picture it.
Right, so they might be younger than, say, I don't know, the village elder,
Yeah.
but when you're talking about the forge, their word is law. It's their expertise. That's what gives them that
Yeah,
standing.
exactly, exactly. And this whole emphasis on lived experience, on the investment of time, it's particularly interesting when you think about elven children, right?
Oh, because elven children are so incredibly rare. They're like, what did Blackson call them? Like family jewels.
It's a good way to put it, yeah. Elven children are deeply, deeply cherished. Their births are often seen as a sign, you know, like a message from the gods, like some kind of prediction about what's to come. And because they're so rare, elven children are raised, get this, communally. The entire community is involved in raising a single child.
Whoa, talk about pressure. No wonder Blackson calls them little oracles wrapped in swaddling clothes.
I mean, it's true. Just imagine, let's say there's a sudden increase in elven births. Well, that's often interpreted as a sign to get ready for war, almost like the gods are making sure there will be a new generation ready to face whatever's coming, you know.
So, yeah, not your typical play date.
Not quite, no. And that actually leads perfectly into this, well, this really pivotal event that's had a huge impact on how elves do things today. The Darrow betrayal.
Ah, yes, the Darrow. Blackson really gets into this in the guide. He describes it as this massive historical trauma. For anyone who needs a refresher, the Darrow were once, well, they were trusted allies of the elves. But then they went and betrayed that trust in the worst way possible.
It was a brutal betrayal, really shook the elves to their core. You see, this betrayal had a profound impact on their culture. It instilled this deep, almost instinctual distrust of deception. And that's why even something as simple as, let's say, greetings, well, honesty and sincerity aren't just, you know, polite things to do. They're absolutely essential.
You're saying like a casual what's up? That wouldn't really fly with an elf.
Let's just say it wouldn't be received quite the way you might expect. You see, Blackson, he devotes a whole chunk of his guide to the finer points of elven greetings. Even what we might consider small talk, well, the elves. They take it very, very seriously.
And Blackson, always the meticulous diplomat, he doesn't hold back, does he? He breaks down every detail, like who's supposed to initiate the greeting, which, by the way, is all about showing deference, not some weird power move.
Precisely. Blackson even gets into the nitty-gritty of Old Elvish, the language they use for these greetings. He explains the nuances of the formal structure. Fascinating stuff.
See, that's what I appreciate about Blackson's approach. He doesn't just tell you what to say, but he tells you how to say it too. Apparently, even something as simple as eye contact during a group greeting, well, there's an etiquette for that.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about respect, acknowledging everyone present, but not in a way that comes off as, I don't know, like you're challenging them or ignoring others. It's a delicate balance.
Okay, I'm already starting to feel a bit self-conscious about my handshake technique, and we haven't even gotten to body language yet.
Hmm.
Blackson's got this whole section on how not to approach an elf. He calls them adventurer blunders. They sound both terrifying and hilarious, I've got to say.
Elves, they notice everything. It's like, you know those little subconscious habits you have? Elves, they kick up on all of them.
So you're saying if you're like thinking something shady, they can tell. That's kind of what Blackson says, isn't it? He calls them walking lie detectors.
That's putting it a bit bluntly, but yeah, there's some truth to it. They've had, well, let's just say a lot of time to really hone their senses. They are like masters of reading people. And speaking of reading people, Blackson gets into this whole thing about personal space and
Oh,
elves.
yeah, he has that whole bit about the two longsword rule, right? It's kind of hilarious.
Exactly. That's what he recommends. Keep a distance of, well, at least 2 long swords when you first approach an elf.
Okay, I don't know about you, but that's a lot more space than I usually give anyone. No high fives for the elves, I guess. Starting to notice a theme here, you know? No sudden movements, no touching your sword, and definitely keep your distance. It's like trying to, I don't know, befriend a very, very elegant, very, very perceptive house cat.
Amusing analogy. And honestly, this emphasis on non-confrontational body language, it probably goes back to, you guessed it, the Darrow betrayal.
Because if you get too close, or if your hand's hovering over your sword, that
Yeah.
could be taken the wrong way.
Exactly. They don't want to think you're going to pull a Darrow. Remember, the Darrow, they were all about deception and trickery. After what happened, elves became so much more aware of even the tiniest hint of a threat. It's fascinating, how history impacts even these little everyday interactions.
That's what's so cool about Blackson's writing.
Huh.
He doesn't just give you a list of rules like, do this, don't do that. He wants you to get it, He connects all the dots. Speaking of connecting the dots, let's talk about sworn sincerity. It sounds like something straight out of, well, one of those epic fantasy novels.
It does have a certain ring to it, doesn't it? But it's a real thing, and it's huge in elven culture. Try to imagine a society where honesty, direct communication, it's not just a nice idea, it's like woven into who they are.
So no white lies for the elves, not even little ones.
Not if you actually want them to trust you. That's what sworn sincerity is all about. It's how they demonstrate that commitment to telling the truth. It's a specific gesture, a combination of hand movements and posture that basically means I'm being totally upfront with you.
And leave it to Blackson to dig into the history.
Yeah.
Turns out it's ancient, even for the elves. We could be talking thousands of years. What's really wild is that it wasn't just about being polite. Blackson thinks it was also a way to sniff out those Darrow spies.
Exactly. Let's not forget, the Darrows were masters of deception. By making this gesture a part of their interactions, elves could get a read on how truthful someone was being. It was essential after the betrayal, a way to tell who was a friend and who was an enemy.
Okay, so how does it work? Do I just yell, I swear, and cross my fingers behind my back?
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling that won't go over so well.
Not quite. It's a little more, shall we say, refined than that. Blackson describes it as a tiger's fist kind of gesture. You bring your middle finger to your lips and hold your hand in a certain way.
A tiger's fist.
Intense.
The imagery is pretty strong, right? And here's where it gets really interesting. The exact timing of the gesture, how it's performed, all that can change depending on the region and the situation.
So like regional dialects, but for gestures. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Exactly. Like, let's take the Wood Elves from the Western Councils. They're more relaxed. The gesture is more fluid, less strict about when you do it. They might do it before speaking, like a promise, or after, as a way of confirming what they said.
Yeah, much more their style. But what about those elves from the Auburn Kingdom? Blackson always seems particularly interested in them.
And for good reason, the Auburn Elves. They're fascinating. They're all about formality. They usually do the gesture right after making eye contact, like a silent agreement to be completely honest with each other.
Gotcha. Timing is everything.
Yeah.
What about the city of OO? They always seem a little different. How do they handle sworn sincerity?
The city of Oo, well, they've always been a bit more, let's say, enigmatic. They do things their own way, like with the sworn sincerity. They'll still touch their middle finger to their lips, but they tend to hold their hand at a bit of an angle, almost like they're, I don't know, weighing the truth of what they're about to say.
It's amazing how one gesture can have so many different meanings, even within the same culture, you know? Really makes you think about all the diversity within elven society.
Yeah.
But okay, we've talked about greetings and body language and being honest, but what about like actually talking to an elf? Is it all flowery poems and riddles? Because honestly, riddles kind of stress me out.
I can see how those might be a bit much, especially in casual conversation. But Blackson, he's pretty clear that while elves appreciate eloquence, they value clarity just as much. And after the whole Darrow betrayal, well, trust is paramount, right? They value honesty, directness, but always delivered with, a certain elegance and grace.
So no beating around the bush with the elf.
Not really, no. It's more about, how do I put it, striking that balance between being direct and being diplomatic. It's like you can be completely honest without being a jerk about it. Elves, they appreciate it when you think before you speak, like you're choosing your words carefully.
That's actually kind of refreshing, No hidden meanings or passive aggression.
Yeah.
But what if you're, well, like me, and you're not exactly known for your subtlety? What if you're talking to an elf and you're like, wait, what? Is it okay to ask for clarification?
Oh, absolutely. Elves, they respect someone who's genuinely curious, who wants to learn. Blackson actually tells a few stories about how, his willingness to ask questions actually helped him build stronger relationships with the elves he met. They saw it as a sign of respect.
So being curious is like a superpower when it comes to diplomacy. Who knew?
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
I-
Anything else I should know before I go out and try to befriend an elf?
Blackson, he leaves us with this one last piece of advice, and it might be the most important one of all. Be patient. Elven interactions, they often move at a different pace than what us humans are used to. I mean, they have centuries, sometimes millennia, under their belt. A few hours to them, it might feel like a couple minutes to us.
Wow, that really puts things in perspective. So I'm guessing rushing the conversation is a big no-no.
Let's just say it wouldn't go over well. So don't interrupt. Don't try to force the conversation to go faster. Let it unfold naturally. Give space for pauses, for reflection. Blackson actually says that some of the most meaningful conversations he had with elves happened during those quiet moments, where no one's saying a word.
It's kind of beautiful when you
Yeah.
think about it. It's like they're teaching us to really listen, to appreciate the silences as much as the words.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what we've learned today is that elven etiquette, it's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? You've got to be respectful, aware, honest, and above all, patient.
Yeah.
You've got to think about what your body's saying. You've got to speak from the heart, and you've got to respect their rhythm. It's a lot to keep in mind, but as Blackson shows us, it's worth it. Building those bridges of understanding, that's what really matters.
It does indeed. It makes me think of that line from Blackson's Guide. He says, to understand elven etiquette is to glimpse into a world where time moves differently, where words hold immense power, and where even the smallest gesture can speak volumes.
It's a world I'm ready to explore, even if it means I have to work on my tiger fist and maybe stock up on patience. And on that note, dear listeners, we'll leave you with this thought from Thumb Blackson himself. As you venture out into the world, remember that understanding and respect are the greatest gifts you can offer any culture, especially one as ancient and as complex as the elves. And until next time, may your deep dives be filled with fascinating discoveries.